done for me. Who brings our chaos back into order? Who makes the orphan the son and daughter? The King of glory, the King above all kings. Who rules the nations, truth and justice, shines like the sun and all of his brilliance. The King of glory, the King above all kings. This is amazing grace. This is unfailing love. You would take my place. You would bear my cross. You would lay down your life, and I would be set free. Oh, Jesus, I sing for all that you've done for me. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy is the King who conquered the grave. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy is the King who conquered the grave. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy is the King who conquered the grave. Worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Worthy, worthy, oh, this is amazing grace. This is unfailing love. And you would take my place. And you would bear my cross. You would lay down your life, and I would be set free. Oh, Jesus, I sing for all that you've done for me.
Christ alone, my hope is found. He's my light, my strength, my song. His cornerstone, his solid ground. Fear through the fiercest drought and storm. What heights of love, what depths of peace. When fears are still, when striving cease. My comforter, my all in all, here in the love of Christ I stand. Oh, in Christ alone, took on flesh, fullness of God in helpless babe. His gift of love and righteousness, scorned by the ones he came to save. Till on that cross, as Jesus died, the wrath of God was satisfied. For every sin on him was laid. Here in the death of Christ I live. Buried in the ground, his body lay, like the wolf by darkness fade. Then bursting forth in glorious day, up from the grave he rose again. And as he stands in victory, since curse has lost its grip on me, for I am his and he is mine, but with the precious blood of Jesus commands my destiny. No power of hell, no scheme of man can ever pluck me from his hand till he returns and calls me home. Here in the power of Christ I'll stand. Beautiful Lord, wonderful Savior, I know for sure all of my days are held in your hands, crafted into your perfect plan. You gently call me into your presence, guiding me by your Holy Spirit. Teach me, dear Lord, to live all of my life through your eyes. I'm captured by your holy calling. Set me apart. I know you are drawing me to yourself. Lead me, Lord, I pray. Take me, mold me, use me, fill me. I give my life to the potter's hand. You call me, you guide me, lead me, walk beside me. I give my life to the potter's hand. Beautiful Lord, wonderful Savior, I know for sure all of my days are held in your hands, crafted into your perfect plan. You gently call me into your presence, guide me by your Holy Spirit, and teach me, dear Lord, to live all of my life through your eyes. I'm captured by your holy calling. Set me apart. I know you're drawing me to yourself. Lead me, Lord, I pray. Take me, mold me, use me, fill me. I give my life to the potter's hand. Call me, guide me, lead me, walk beside me. I give my life to the potter's hand. You call me, guide me, lead me, walk beside me. I give my life to say. But love is out of view, out of head. I walk to the meadow and stare at the flowers. Dressed than any girl, already there. So why should
Bible reading. The Bible reading for today is John 20, verse 26 to 29, and John 21, verse 1 to 7. So I'll start with John 20, verse 26 to 29. And it says, it says, 8 days later, his disciples were inside again, and Thomas was with them. Although the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." Then he said to Thomas, "Put your finger here and see my hands, and put out your hand and place it in my side. Do not disbelieve, but believe." Thomas answered him, "My Lord and my God." Jesus said to him, "Have you believed because you have seen me? Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed." So that's John 20. And now we're going to John 21, verse 1 to 7. And it says, After this, Jesus revealed himself again to the disciples by the Sea of Tiberias. And he revealed himself in this way. Simon Peter, Thomas, Nathanael of Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, and 2 others of the disciples were together. Simon Peter said to them, "I am going fishing." They said to him, "We will go with you." They went out and got into the boat, but that night they caught nothing. Just as day was breaking, Jesus stood on the shore. Yet the disciples did not know that it was Jesus. Jesus said to them, "Children, do you have any fish?" They answered him, "No." He said to them, "Cast the net on the right side of the boat, and you will find some." So they cast it, and now they were not able to hold it in, because of the quantity of fish. That disciple whom Jesus loved therefore said to Peter, "It is Lord." When Simon Peter heard that it was Lord, he put out his outer garment, for he was stripped for work, and threw himself into the sea.
I want to talk a little bit about not going back to life as normal, especially after Easter and after the resurrection. So in the week leading up to Easter, or 2 Sundays ago, we talked about this whole week of what happened heading up towards the resurrection. Then last week we looked mostly at the day of the resurrection, and today I want to look a bit at that, and then what happened sort of shortly thereafter in the week and a little longer from there. It's tempting to think that, like, whoa, Jesus rose from the dead, and now his followers are going to go out excited and emboldened, and they're going to go change the world. And when you read through the book of Acts, like, they do that. Acts tells mostly about how that went through the Roman Empire, but it truly was more than that. They did start to change the world. And from some of our God stories in the past, we've heard about how they reached Armenia, and they reached India, and other parts of the world, Ethiopia, etc. And so, like, the word of God spreads, but it didn't happen automatically. It didn't happen on the first day, much less in the first week. And so, just like last week, I talked a little bit about this slow dawn of believing, that sometimes it takes a while before that starts to kick in. Their courage in sharing seemed like it had a bit of that as well. And so I want to look at that. So John's account in John 20, verse 19, which is sort of the story right before Alexander's reading, we hear that it's on the evening of the first day of the week, which is the day Jesus rose from the dead. So on that day, we're told that the disciples, that 10 of them at least, were together. And the doors were locked for fear of the Jews. And as I read that, as I thought about it, like, it makes sense that they have the doors locked and that they're afraid. If you just think about what had just happened in their lives, right? Like, just a few days before this, an angry mob with religious leaders and just other people had been yelling for the death of their friend, the torture of their role model. And then it happened. You could see why that would cause them to be afraid. I mean, just thinking of how other recent events and how that affects the way we view people and how sort of isolated we get from things. I remember a British friend telling me about like the day after the Brexit vote, which now seems like such a long time ago. But he said when we walked outside, it just felt like everybody was suspicious of everyone else. Like, how did this happen? And I don't know if I know the rest of you because of these things. And then now if I just look at like with Corona, right? Like in the last few weeks, especially in the first week or two as they're starting to impose more restrictions, it felt to me like there was just a lot of this concern and like people started getting suspicious of one another and who has Corona? Do you have it? Are you asymptomatic but a carrier? I don't want people too close to me. And when someone would come to the door, it was more like, do I open it? How do I do this? But it wasn't just the concerns of health, but also like, how will other people perceive me? And is someone else, I guess, gonna like, call the cops on me because I have a friend over at my house or I did get too close to someone? I remember like in the Netherlands, at least, we could go out to playgrounds, and so I'd take my boys to the playgrounds, and it would be this sort of kind of cool weather, but it was starting to get warmer. But then as they're biking, my two boys, like, they bike, they get really warm, we get to the playground, and then they stop and get off the bike, and, like, the cold air starts hitting their lungs, and so they cough. It's a natural thing, right? Like, hot and cold just come together, and so they would cough. But, like, when my child would cough, I'd be like, is everyone going to look at me bad? Do they think my child is the one spreading Corona? He wasn't coughing before, I swear. It's just natural. It's from activity. It's okay. And I remember having those feelings like, is everyone looking at me? And those are, for some people, like, those are very real and very real concerns, but I mean, then take that sort of a situation like we have with things that are as big but sort of different than Brexit and Corona restrictions. Put that with like people have just tortured and murdered your role model, your friend. Like that's what the disciples are facing. They are afraid of the Jews because they don't know. Like walking in the street, the crowd had been big enough. I mean, have those feelings of looking around and be like, were you one of the ones that was yelling for Jesus to die? And would you yell for me to die too? So they're locked behind the door, and it makes sense. Another thing to add to that's been really interesting to me in just the last day or two, thinking of how their situation would have been, was they're in the time of Passover, and we often think of like Passover as like a one-day thing, but Passover, it was an 8-day festival that the disciples, they would have been celebrating it all 8 days of it. And even from before Jesus' time, but certainly in Jesus' time and after, one of the sort of traditions during Passover is they would recite certain psalms, especially often Psalm 113 to 118. And for those that have been keeping track of the videos I put on Facebook, you've heard some of these things as I've gone through this week. But Psalm 118, the last one of those, yesterday as I was just thinking about it, and it's interesting for me to sort of try to put myself in the disciples' shoes singing these songs, because they would have been singing them likely every night, maybe morning and night, depending upon how often. And so singing psalms, and as you read it, some of the stuff that Psalm 118 says is this: the Lord is for me, so I will have no fear. What can mere people do to me? Yes, the Lord is for me. He will help me. I will look in triumph on all who hate me. Now consider if you just knew Jesus had been crucified, you don't know the resurrection is coming, you just knew Jesus has been crucified, and then you have to sing that song and say, Lord's for me, I'll have no fear. I thought the Lord was for Jesus too, but look what happened to him. What can mere people do to me? It's meant as a rhetorical question. That the answer is like, oh, well, God's for me, who can be against me? Yeah. But as those disciples singing that song, what can mere people do to me? Well, I just saw how much they messed up God. I don't even know that I want to consider what can mere people do to me, because it can be pretty bad. And it just made me asking myself, like, how often do I sing a worship song? But, know that I don't fully mean it. or know that, like, it's hard to be singing it right now. Or I say it, but it's kind of going through the motions of it. And man, singing through some of that stuff, going through those psalms that night, like, and the nights afterwards. So now that happened, and now it's the first night of the week, so it's Sunday night, and they're still singing the same song each day and going, what can man do to me? I will have no fear. And yet they have the door locked for fear of the Jews. I'm not saying right now that if you don't mean it, don't sing it, but it's real to consider. Just because you sing it doesn't mean you mean it. You know? And so just because we sing these songs or recite these Bible verses, do you still sort of metaphorically have the door locked to your house while you sing worship to God? But then Jesus shows up. We're told that he comes through the locked door. And in Luke's account of it, we're told that there had been these two other disciples that had been on the road to Emmaus that had seen Jesus, and then they come back and they're talking to the disciples, telling them, this is what we've seen, this is what just happened, and Jesus was with us. We talked with him, we walked with him, we sat down at a table, and then Jesus took bread and he broke it and he disappeared. Poof. And it sounds like from the story, and it would have been so awesome to be there, is that like, they say, and he disappeared, poof, and then Jesus appears. Poof. Like, it's a great timing by Jesus. I love Jesus' timing. And Jesus shows up, but we're told that they think they've just seen a ghost. And that, again, makes sense. They know the door is locked, and people don't just walk through a door. Plenty of people walk into a door, but then they get stopped by the door. But people don't just like show up through a door. It makes sense that they thought they were seeing a ghost. But then Jesus says, don't be afraid. It's really me. They get to see his hands. They get to see his side. We're not told when Jesus was walking with the ones on the road to Emmaus, and then they get to their meal, and Jesus breaks the bread and vanishes. We're not told if he took the bread with him, or if, like, the bread just drops. I like to think that probably Jesus had the bread, and then when he shows up again, like, he still has the bread, because he says to them, like, hey, I'm real, I can eat. By the way, I got some bread. Do you have any salmon or something? I was looking forward to a fish sandwich. Can you give me some fish? And then he eats his sandwich. We're not told he still does have the bread, but the rest, like, it's real. He says, you have some fish? Let's eat. And Jesus eats, and they see, this is real. This is Jesus. So we're told that they're amazed. They're excited. If there's a time to feel invincible, if there's a time to be like, anything can happen, we can do anything, it would be then, right? The disciples finally see and know Jesus is resurrected from the dead. What can man do to me? Kill me? They just killed Jesus and they couldn't kill him. Or like he didn't, they killed him and he didn't die or stay dead. This is amazing. This is fantastic. You would think they would feel invincible, that they would have all the boldness and courage to go out. And they only sort of do. They do tell Thomas, who's the one of the living 11 that wasn't there. And so they tell Thomas, we've seen the Lord. We put our hands in his fingerprints. I mean, we touched the side. He's alive. This is real. And that's a That's an important step after you've come to that realization to now tell someone. But they tell Thomas, and Thomas doesn't believe them. And I kind of don't blame him either in this scenario where he's like, you saw Jesus, you believe, good for you. I didn't, and I don't, and I won't until I see it. So we're told 1 week later, they're in the same room, and guess what the door is like now? Exactly locked the same way. Now this time we're not told that it was locked for fear of the Jews, but we're not told any other reason. They still have a locked door. Last time Jesus walked through it, he's alive. They should start now feeling invincible, and they still got the door locked. I mean, I can't see how Jesus, the week before, would have, before he left, been, oh, by the way, guys, keep the door locked. I don't think that's how he made his exit. And I certainly don't think the disciples told him, Jesus, could you see yourself out by, the whole vanishing thing? Because, yeah, could you just leave that latched? Because that's going to be safer for us. So a week later, they still have the door locked, and Jesus seems to keep coming through our locked doors. Even when we're kind of keeping life as normal, he keeps showing up. And he does show up to Thomas and says, okay, Thomas, here's my hands, here's my side. And Thomas then responds, my Lord and my God. And Thomas is willing to believe. And that, I think, is to his credit. Because there are times when people are like, show us a sign, Jesus. And Jesus is like, I showed you lots of signs. They're like, well, we just need another. And the sign isn't good enough. But Thomas is like, okay, I need to see this to believe it. He sees it and says, okay, now I believe it. And there are conversations you'll have with people that they'll be like, well, if only I'd see this. And some of them, honestly, probably don't understand themselves well enough. Or they're just honestly lying. Honestly, lying is a strange way to put it. They're just lying. And they're not going to change. But other people, it is a serious thing of they know what it is that they're looking for. And in the case of Thomas, Jesus does. So now it looks like the disciples are finally able to start moving out of the house a little bit. From Matthew's account, Jesus had told women, oh, go tell my disciples to go to Galilee. And so in John's account, it makes sense. They go to Galilee. It seems like they're doing what Jesus asked them to. Go to Galilee, you'll see me there. But there's not a whole lot of clarity, right? Go to Galilee. Galilee is a region. And there's a sea there, and there's places around it. I don't know if you've ever been by a sea, but it's not just, oh, I showed up at the sea and I see everyone by the sea. The sea is big enough that I can be here and I don't know, maybe he's on the other side, we weren't even told the sea, just Galilee in general. Some of you know I used to live on an island, and it was less than 30 kilometers long, I think. I don't remember kilometers as well, but it was a small island. It wasn't that big of an area. And even still, if you just told me, go there, find someone. This is just a small island. And to find one person out of 50,000 would be tough. I did it one time. I was trying to find a friend of mine, and I'm looking all over the island and asking people who knew him, and it was tough to find him. Jesus just says, go to Galilee. You'll see me there. Okay, so they go to Galilee, and they're waiting. And it seems like Peter just has what do I do with myself? And so when Peter doesn't know what to do, he just does what he's used to doing. And he says, I'm going fishing. He was a fisherman by trade. That's what he'd done. And so I'm going fishing. And various commentators and people will look into why is he doing it? Is Peter going fishing just because he's bored and he wants something to do? He's like, I don't want to sit here. I'll at least go fishing. Is it because he's disappointed and he's sort of trying to go back to his old life? of, okay, I don't know what's taking Jesus so long, so I'm just going to go fish. Is Peter just hungry? Also possible. I mean, the disciples are people who, most of them seem to have had the types of jobs that are like, they have to live each day and get food each day. It's not, oh, let me go to the refrigerator or let me go to the freezer or I'm going to pop down to Albert Heijn. So it could just be, like, I'm hungry. We traveled. I don't got nothing. I'm going fishing. I'm going to get something to eat. Whatever was his reason with it. I don't think it was just, ooh, I want to like have some time to ponder stuff on the water. Because he doesn't go alone. There's these others that all say, sure, we'll go with you. And I don't know if you're the type of person who likes to process things in a small, confined space, like a fishing boat when you're not alone. But for me, that's at least not my thing. I would be like, I need to ponder this really deeply. Hey, the 5 of you want to get with me in a boat? And let's just try to get fish. I'm kind of hungry. This is not a good combination for me. But what we do know is this. Peter doesn't seem to be getting in the boat so that he can see Jesus. He's not expecting to find Jesus out on the water, because when Jesus shows up, he's not focused on finding Jesus. He's focused on getting fish. So they're out there, they've been fishing, haven't caught anything, and Jesus shows up on the shore, but they don't realize it's him. Hey, have you caught anything? Nope, all night, nothing. Cast your nets on the other side. So Jesus starts talking, and instead of the whole like, wait a second, are you Jesus? That's not in the front of their mind. And that's part of where with the whole like, going back to things as normal, I'm not saying Peter was running from Jesus or that the other disciples were. They'd followed where Jesus said, but they still got distracted in the process. And they weren't expecting Jesus, it seems. Or at least Peter wasn't. They were expecting to get fish. They were expecting that. But they weren't expecting Jesus to show up. And then like the first moment Jesus is there, I see him. So the man on the beach says, throw it on the other side. They do. They have this huge catch of fish. Seems like John says to Peter, it's the Lord. And then Peter's reaction is something. Because like it seems like Peter doesn't say anything. He just grabs his tunic, wraps it around him, and jumps into the water. Now, I mean, there's Jesus and Peter and water is sort of like Andre Rieu, a violin, and the Freithof. It's just a thing. They just go together. It doesn't happen all the time, but it's no surprise when you see these three things together. Jesus, Peter, water. It's, oh yeah, well, yeah, that's part of their story. It's a thing. But in these stories before, like, Peter does it differently. So what's he thinking when he jumps out of a boat and starts swimming? Like, at other times, he asked Jesus, like, if it's you, call me to come on the water. And this time, there's no asking to be asked. He just jumps in the water. There's no trying to walk on the water, which we saw in an earlier story. Like, no, there's none of that. It's like, forget walking, I'm swimming. I'm going for it. There's no worry about sending Jesus away. In one of the earlier times, he tells Jesus, go away from me. This time, he's now obviously jumping in the water, going forward towards Jesus. And the fish is just out of the question. In one of the first stories of Jesus, Peter, and water, like, there's this catch of fish. And so he gets the fish, and then, like, their nets are breaking, so they call to the others, hey, come help us with the fish. And Peter seems to stay focused on the fish until the fish are caught. And this time, it's just like, forget fish. I'm jumping in the water. And he leaves everyone else behind, which makes me wonder how they're feeling. Like, we have this huge catch of fish, we're all trying to grab it, and then he just lets go. In the last few months, we've been moving people. Several people have, like, moved houses and things like that. Consider, like, you have a couple of guys that are all lifting a fridge, or let's go with like a washing machine, because some of those washing machines, those are beasts. Those are horrible. I am glad to help people with it, but I'm not excited to carry it, right? So consider you have like 4 people. They're carrying a washing machine, and it's heavy. And the 4 of you are like, you're trying to get it up some steps, which is crazy enough. Everyone has to keep their balance. And then Jesus shows up. And someone's like, whoa, there's Jesus. And one of the guys is just like, peace out, enjoy carrying your dishwasher or washing machine, I'm going. And just like, leaves them, drops it, and goes. Part of me would be like, that's great, you love Jesus so much. Part of me would be like, get back here and hold this washing machine, you're gonna kill us. Peter ditches people. He's just like, forget it, I'm gone. And he jumps in the water and he starts swimming to Jesus, and the others, they're just left to sort of, in the boat, try to bring the fish to land. Is Peter showing off, or does he just not know what to do with himself? Because for those that like know the story, like the night before Jesus is crucified, Jesus is put on trial, and Peter is there around the trial seeing it, but then all these people, they see Peter, they hear him like, hey, aren't you with Jesus? And he denies it. He's like, no, I don't know the man. And he calls down curses on himself. He's like, I'm not part of, no, I'm not. And in one of the gospel accounts, the last time when Peter says, I don't know him, and he curses himself in saying it, we're told that Jesus looks at Peter. And then Peter, he just breaks down and weeps bitterly. So, like, Peter knows that there's this tension in the relationship, it seems. And we don't know that Peter, up until this point, has really been able to talk about it. That Peter knows, hey, Jesus, so you saw me at this horrible moment, and you told me it was going to happen, but I said, no, it's not going to happen. But it did happen, and then you saw it, and I feel so ashamed of myself. Now, Peter has seen Jesus, yes. But again, it's been in a small room with a locked door with a bunch of other people. And I don't know if you've ever had like things with people where it's the whole, okay, there's something we need to talk about, but there's all these people around and they're all excited to see him. I mean, Jesus shows up and then it's like his birthday party. Everyone's looking at Jesus like, oh, Jesus, let's be around Jesus. We want to touch you. We want to talk to you. And that's not really the moment that you want to go up and be like, hey, Jesus, so, yeah, sorry, bye. Like, you can't get away. The room is locked. And so maybe Peter sees his opportunity. Like, now I can get to Jesus. Now's my chance that I can maybe have a little bit of a personal conversation. Which he does get with Jesus, but after the food. So Peter swims to shore. The others come along. But if nothing else, Peter, like, he's going towards Jesus. He's not running away from him, and he's humbling himself. And that's one of the things that throughout this week, I feel like God has said to me several times, like, the importance, the freedom of humbling myself. And that's something that I think he wants to share with others. Like, there is a freedom in being able to humble yourself. And there's various ways, I guess, to do that before God. Like, how do you come humbly? With Peter, it seems like he jumps in the water and starts swimming. And that is something that, like, he looks kind of silly doing it. There's a perfectly good boat, but instead he's out there swimming back to shore. Like, he's willing to kind of humble himself just because he wants to get to Jesus. For me, one of those ways that's been kind of through my walk of faith is that I do literally bow down sometimes. Like, I get on my knees, which we see in the Psalms, we see in the Bible. And that, for me, is sometimes just, I don't know, one of the best places to be. And this week, there was one morning that, like, I'd woken up, I was lying in bed, and it was comfortable in bed, but I was ready to get out, and I just felt like I was like, get on your knees, man. And honestly, it'd been too long. Because often, like, I'll pray when I'm walking, I'll pray when I'm sitting, I'll pray when I'm biking, I'll pray with all these ways, but I hadn't just taken the moment to be like, I'm stopping, I'm getting alone with you, and I'm just gonna humble myself before God, and let's talk about some stuff. And that seemed to be what Peter was maybe trying for. And hopefully an encouragement to you today is to take those opportunities. Heck, a lot of us are at home. Some of us, that means you're by yourself and you have space. And some of us, I know that means you have tons of people around you and you feel like you don't have space. I'm not sure where's going to be the best place for you to find like alone space to humble yourself. For those that's easy, great. For those that's hard, I get it because I'm somewhat there with you. I have people in my household around a lot as well. I have family, I have kids who come up and jump on me when I'm trying to have a time of being quiet, or they walk in and all these things. But find some space to humble yourself. Peter seems to have done that when he jumps in the water, swims to Jesus. He gets to land, and Jesus is just being Jesus. I love it. He already has a fire started, and he already has food that he's cooking. He already has fish. And that's just one of the things I love about Jesus. Like, Jesus has already got his food. And Jesus had plenty of meals made for him, yes. But I believe real men also know how to cook. Jesus knew how to cook, so Jesus is in charge of this. But Jesus also, like, he's got his own food ready. It'd be like, so back in John 4, the disciples are talking to Jesus, and he's like, I have food you don't know about. And he's like, I got my secret stash. I already have some fish and stuff ready. But then he's like, well, we have more people. So he calls to them and says, hey, bring some of the fish that you just caught. We're going to cook. We're going to have a meal together. And this to me shows a bit more of where it feels like Peter just doesn't know what to do with himself. Because, like, first, Peter's like, forget the fish. I'm jumping in the water. I'm going to Jesus. They all get on land. She's like, hey, bring some fish. And Peter's like, I'm getting the fish. All about the fish. And so it seems like he's trying all by himself to now lug all this fish up by himself. He seems to have this, I don't know if it's nervous energy or this, what do? I want to talk to Jesus. I feel like I can't talk to Jesus. I jump in the water. No, I get the fish. Forget the fish. No, bring back the fish. What do I do with the fish? Peter seems to be maybe that type. And maybe he's trying to show off again, like, look, I can get all this fish. Jesus, whatever you want. I'll do anything. But he gets the fish. They eat. And then you finally see, like, Peter and Jesus get to have their conversation. They get to have their awkward conversation that maybe had been put off for understandable reasons because other people are around, but Peter's been looking for this opportunity. And they get to go for a walk down the beach, and Jesus is talking with Peter and saying, hey, do you love me? And random side note, bringing the love thing into a conversation with people, I mean, that can make for those awkward conversations, right? Like, especially when you think of, like, romantic relationships, boy-girl things. So take that kind of thing, but then, like, take it out of the whole romantic context. Just when people use the love word, it starts to be like, okay, this is something big. And Peter and Jesus are having that where Jesus is like, Peter, do you love me? And he asks him that 3 times, which is the same number of times that Peter had denied Jesus. But Peter doesn't seem to run from the conversation. He's maybe overestimating himself again, as he usually does, but he wants to be with Jesus, and he does want to get to have the awkward conversation. Even if it doesn't start with, like, hey, so I'm sorry, which could have been a really good way for him to start. And for some of the people listening to this, maybe you need to have an awkward conversation with Jesus. Maybe you've got so used to just, like, there was stuff that happened, and then you haven't talked about it with him since. Whether that was denying Jesus in some sort of way or whatever else it was. Maybe it was singing worship songs, but knowing that you're not meaning it because you're keeping the door locked and you're still afraid, or maybe it's not having told a friend, or who knows. But take those opportunities. If you want to avoid your life just going back to normal, what it was like before you knew there was resurrection, before the power of God changed everything, it's sometimes dealing with some of the stuff that happened before that and just coming clean. And Peter and Jesus, they get to have that reconciliation moment. So, what I want us to get to do now is sort of make space for that time, for you to have a conversation with Jesus. Now, some of you are in a room by yourself. This is going to be easy, and some of you are sitting next to friends or your husband or wife or something, or have kids around you. Maybe it won't be as easy for you to have that like awkward conversation with Jesus right now. Have I got my focus off of you and onto fish? Obviously, that's metaphorically, but like something else. Is there stuff that you just need to talk with Jesus about? And I want us to have that moment to do that. But first, let's pray. Heavenly Father, you see us. You know us. You know what's been going on. You know what's in our hearts and our minds. You know all of the amazing courage we've had to tell others about you. And you know all of the fear and shame in this when we haven't. You know all the ways that we've screwed up this week. You know everything that I've done in secret and everything that I've done in public. You know all the stuff that we probably wish you didn't know about us. And you know all the things that we wish that you did. May we just come to you with the joy of knowing that you're alive and that you're God and that the resurrection is true and that changes everything, that all the stuff that felt like death in our lives, that we can truly have life instead, that everything that felt like it was over and destroyed, that you're able to make things new. So God, today as we give you some space to talk with us, I pray that you would be making us new once again by your Holy Spirit. That you would speak to us clearly, that you would convict us where our hearts have been wrong. You'd show us things that we need to see, that you would comfort us where we've been concerned and worried and weighed down with cares, that you would encourage us, that you would strengthen us in places where you've given us strength, and that you would tell us that you love us, and that you know us, and that you're for us, and that you're with us. Speak to each of us what we need to hear. Thank you for being a God who can do that. We love you. In Jesus' name, amen.